All right, review 4, about halfway home here. Going to work today a little bit with solving equations when we have multiple variables. Ooh, not necessarily fun, but something we can do. I'm going to treat this like I would anything that I'm trying to solve or factor. So I'm trying to solve for m, but my problem is I see two m's here, and I can't have two m's if I'm trying to solve it. But both terms have an m. Okay. I can take an m out and say, okay, m times what gets me to m? 1. M times what gets me to math? Well, I already have the m, so I just need the ath. I got to be careful when I say that. And notice I'm down to just having one m term now. So if I'm solving for m, and I'm multiplying it by this set of parentheses, if I just divide by that set of parentheses, I have m on a side by itself, and I'm set. Now, sometimes I may be able to just divide right away. Sometimes I have to distribute. Sometimes I have to multiply. There's not one way of doing these. And that's going to be very true, because some of you will come to me in a bit and go, well, I didn't have to take an m out in the other one. I don't know. Again, that's when we go back and look at some of this stuff and see if there's a couple more examples. But treat it like you would any equation. Similar to the one we did in the last review. Evaluate it, f of 4. Which one of these is true for 4? Is 4 less than 4? No. Shoot, I'll go so far as to just cross it out because it doesn't work. Is 4 greater than 4? No, but it's equal to it. So I plug that in. Now again, if you're not comfortable with fractions, let the calculator deal with it. But you got to remember though, no matter what you're doing, you've got to make sure when you're doing that stuff with parentheses, and I don't care if you did negative 3.5, that wouldn't bother me. That's just the route I'm going to go. So that's how we would work one like that. I just got to figure out what value I want to plug in and make it work. Okay. Factoring. This was one I saw that was different from the first couple that we'll see for our first couple of reviews here in a little bit. Remember, stress, 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 stress. Stress the golden rule. Speaking of, this green sheet, which I will get more copies back out of, this is to help you remember, so here's my golden rule, all the things you could need to kind of help you out with these. So if you haven't found that green sheet, we'll get you another one. Do these two terms have anything in common? 4. If I take out the 4, I have x squared, and 4 goes into 64 16 times. And here's where I have to be careful. I can't be content with this. I've always got to look at what's in the parentheses and see, can I factor this? So I look, and I'm like, well, that's a little two-termer. Let's see here. Two-termers, squares. Wait a minute, squares. X squared and 16. Wait, oh, 16 is a perfect square. Oh, it's a difference of squares. It's this. Okay. Whatever I square to get my first term, whatever I square to get my second term, and then since it's minus, I do plus and I do minus, and I'm set. But I always have to be looking for those things. Sometimes they won't have anything in common, sometimes they will. Sometimes it'll be a difference of squares, it might be cubes, it might be a diamond problem, I don't know. But that's how these are gonna work. So again, piecewise, we just did that on the last one, so I'm going to let that one go on this one. I'm going to jump up to number 12 on the back. We're going to do some simplifying. Now, if I'm not sure, I'd look at this and I'd go, okay, let's see if the calculator can help me here. Negative 120. Error, non-real answer. Oh yeah, I knew that. I knew that. How do I deal with this? Let's see. I can start by taking an I out. once I take an I out, now I've got to go back and I've got to try and figure out a way of breaking down this 120 because it's not a perfect square. I have some options. I could start playing with perfect squares and dividing them in on the calculator. That's an option. I could go to my handy dandy chart and start looking for 120s and see if I can find a pair of factors where one of them's a perfect square. Not a terrible idea. But I think in the realm of being quickest, trying to give myself the best chance, what I would probably do is I would take my squares list. Let's see if I can do this. Nice, okay. And I'd start looking at some of those bigger numbers, and I'd say, okay, do any of these go into 120 nicely? Well, 100, no. 64 might. Let's try. Is that square going to work? No, that didn't work. 49, no, let's try 36. And sometimes you may have to try a few before you find one that actually comes in nice. 25, no. 16, no. 4? Got to be something. Okay, 4. So 4 and 30. Square root of 4 is 2. So that gets to hang out with the I. 30 does not break down anymore. It's got to stay where it is. So again, let the information on your flow chart help you. Okay? Even let the multiplication table help if need be. Out of the way for a second. 13 and 14. Show all work, give correct answers. Okay. Working on getting x alone. What do I have to do first if I'm working on getting that negative 4x squared alone? Before I square root, subtract the 8. Before I can do my square rooting, I have to get my x squared by itself as best I can. So I still can't do it at this point. Now what do I need to do to get x squared by itself? Should I add 4? This online dead time brought to you by Algebra 2. Oh, dear people. See, this is why we run into issues. We're waiting to be handed an answer. You've got to think. Your brains do not grow when you do not think. So when I go to square root, I got to remember a couple of things. First, it's a quadratic. There's going to be 2 answers. Then I remind myself, oh yeah, it's a negative. I'm going to have to pull an I out. And then, oh, I got to break down the 18. Now, this one I would hope wouldn't take you long. 9 times 2 is 18. 9's a perfect square. So the square root of 9 is 3, so that gets to hang out with my I. And the 2, not so perfect. It's got to stay under the radical. But it's just like solving a regular negative 4x plus 8 equals 80 equation. I just got to do a square root at the end. Now it's a little different of a situation though on 14. 14, I've got to get that isolated first. We're not used to dividing right away, but in this case we got to do it. And we're also not used to doing the square root until the last step. But again, the x is stuck in the parentheses. The only way I can get it out is by doing the square root. No negative this time, so there's no I. Any suggestions for breaking down 54 with a perfect square? 9 and 6, thank you. Square root of 9 is 3. The 6 is still in radical jail. And I'm going to add my 8 over. Now this is the one other place I got to be a little careful. This is kind of acting like a wall here, this plus minus. The 8 can be on this side, but I can't combine it and call it like 11 or 5 or anything like that. I just got to kind of work that one out. Let's see what else we got here. Simplify, right, in standard form. All right. I stuff. Multiply it through. Here I'm just subtracting, but here I'm actually multiplying. Let's see. 3 times negative 6, negative 18i squared. Now that's striking a bell for some reason. Let's see. What does I squared equal? Negative 1. So this is really, if I can pick up my pen, I'm going to replace the I squared with a negative 1. Negative times negative is positive. And I'm simplified. Okay? You can have i's in your solutions as long as they're not in the denominator. Oh, speaking of the denominator, number 20. If you go through and you have an I in the denominator of a fraction, we multiply by what's called the complex conjugate, which means we just switch the sign of the I portion. Okay, notice I didn't change the sign on the 2, just the I part. And then we got to multiply through and simplify. So I'll multiply that 9 through. Now in the denominator, there's a little more going on here. Because I have binomial terms, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply those out. Try to use the room that I got here, which isn't a lot. So I multiply to fill up the box. I start looking around for like terms. I'm like, okay, 4, negative and positive, 2i cancel, that's good. And then we just said I squared is negative 1. So it's the opposite of negative 1, which is positive 1. Four plus 1 is 5. And I'm rationalized. Okay, as long as there's not an I in the denominator, I'm okay. So that would conclude review number 4. Now,